Hello and welcome to the Exchequer Introduction to Form Designer video. The Form Designer is the core utility in Exchequer which allows you to visually design your own forms and stationery. Multiple sets of stationery can be designed, each having its own defaults. These sets can be applied to different customers and suppliers, allowing excellent flexibility to meet printing requirements. This Form Designer video is aimed at giving you a basic introduction to the utility. The Form Designer can be launched by going to the Utilities menu at the top of the Exchequer toolbar and selecting Form Designer. This will launch a separate screen to Exchequer, so if you are working on a Form Designer, you can always minimise it out of the way if you need to. When you first access the Form Designer, you'll see a number of red lines on the screen, and these will make a little bit more sense when we start actually having a look at some form designs. Basically, anything entered above the top line will appear on every single page. Anything entered in between these two top lines will appear on the first page only. Anything that shows in this middle section here will show detail lines on all pages. Anything in between these bottom lines will appear on all pages, and anything entered below this bottom line will appear on the last page only. And these lines can be dragged if you just hover over them and click and drag them to the relative place. Just a little bit about navigation in the Form Designer itself. Within the File menu, you have the option to select and create a new form design and save your designs, but you can also open your existing designs. And this will automatically go to the Forms folder within the company that you're logged into within Exchequer. We'll talk a little bit more about this shortly, because when we talk about actually amending form designs, we'll look at creating a new form design from an existing one, which I advise is probably the best way to create new templates. Anything that you have on this toolbar you can generally access from the menu option here, but essentially if you hover over them it will tell you what they're doing. So you have new form and new label, open form and save form, print form and print preview, which is quite useful when you're creating templates if you want to just preview that form to see how it's actually going to look when it's printed out. Default fonts, so you can set a default font or you can change that on every single text box if you need to. Adding text fields, adding a bitmap, adding boxes and lines, adding a database field and a table, adding a formula, adding page numbers, groups. This is used to exit the Form Designer, and then this is your help that you probably be used to in normal Exchequer anyway. So for the purpose of this exercise, I'm just going to open up an existing template so that we can amend one. So if I go to File and Open, I'm just going to choose one of the standard demonstration sales invoice designs. So this will open the sales invoice design that's used in the system, and like I said before, I'd advise if you want to create a new form to actually use an existing one and then save it as something else. So before we start working on this, we can just do File and Save As, and for the purpose of this exercise I'll just call it sales invoice _ Joe. And we always try and keep these file names beneath 8 characters long. Okay, so once I'm happy I've saved a copy of that design, I can start working on the design itself. So the first thing that you'll see is that these red lines are in place, so we have printing in certain areas of the form design on different pages. You have a combination here of a logo, some text boxes, and then some actual database fields that are actually pulling information through from the system. If you do wish to have a logo on your stationery designs, that logo does need to be a bitmap, and that bitmap must be stored within the Forms folder of the Exchequer company that you're working within. And in order to import bitmaps, it is just this box here. So if you selected Add Bitmap, it would simply ask you to browse for where that image may be stored and pick up that bitmap file, and then you can just drag it to size and drag it into place. I'm just going to delete that one. Same with text boxes. So this is just plain and simple text box. You know, you can align that as you need to. You can change the font on there if you need to, set different colors, different fonts, different sizes, that kind of thing. Again, anything that you see in the form designer, if you click on it once and it puts a red line around it, you can just hit that delete key on your keyboard and it will get rid of it. And you can use your cursor just to click and drag fields around and resize them. Also, some of these smaller boxes can get quite fiddly, so if you click on it once with your mouse, you can then use your arrow keys on the keyboard just to pop that into place if it's getting a little bit tricky. It's quite useful as well that you have this grid sort of format in the background to help you with aligning fields and things like that as well. The reason I say if you want to create a new template to use an existing one is you'll see this one has got a lot of shaded boxes in the background with text on top of them, so that if we just go to File and Print Preview just to show you what that will look like, everything's in a sort of nice box at the top of the screen here, so that in effect is what that is doing. And all this is, if I actually click on it, is a text box that we've added and we've filled with colour. So this is a text box here, and then we have database fields sitting on top of that text box. So you can see that at the moment this is looking at the account company name and 5 lines of address. Again, the same with a database field. If you want to resize it, delete it, it's just click and delete, or you can click an arrow key or drag it around with your mouse, whatever you need to do to position it. What we're going to do is just add a new database field. So if we use this option here on the toolbar, Add Database Field, and what I'm going to do, you'll see there's 5 lines of address here, but there's no postcode. Now, if you're working on Form Designer quite a lot and you get used to what the fields are that you need, you can simply just start typing the field name into there and press Tab or press Select, and it'll come up and give you a list of those details. If you are completely starting out and you are not sure what the field is that you need at all, you can go to this select button here. And more or less every field that you see on screen in Exchequer is available to use within the Form Designer. It will just be under the relevant section with the tabs along the top. So at the moment we're just looking at account information, so it knows it's a sales account. We just want to pull through the sales information, so we've got account company, account address lines 1 to 5. So the postcode is AC Post CD. So some of them are quite self-explanatory as to what the field names may be. If you're unsure, obviously you can just go through here and scroll through the list until you find the field that you need and just select that onto here. And again, you've got a lot of alignment information and you've got font, so you can obviously change all of that information on there as well. So if I select OK, that just kind of dumps this database field onto the design for me, and I can just click and drag that into place. But as you can see, there isn't really enough room in my nice grey shaded box to actually pop that in. So what I'm going to do is a little bit of a resizing exercise. So I'm just going to click on this and arrow key up to move that up a little bit, and then I'm going to click on my text box here and actually just drag this up to make it a little bit bigger. Then I need to move all of these fields up so that I can get my postcode showing at the bottom of the screen. So we can either just click and hold down the Control key and select all of those fields and just arrow them up, or we could just arrow them up individually. And I'm just going to select my postcode field and drag that into place. Okay, so that's nicely going to sit at the bottom of there now. I could do the same with the delivery information if I needed to, and this is kind of where your grid comes in useful, so that you can drag everything into place and just try and line it up with the information that you have over there. So I'm going to do a similar thing with this and just highlight all of those fields, arrow key up to move those into place. And I'm just going to add a database field, but I mean what you could even do is select a field and use your Windows copy and paste function. So I'm going to Control C and Control V, and that's actually created another copy of this address line 5, I could then just double click into that and say, well, actually, I don't need this address line 5. I'm going to select the postcode. Or alternatively, just start typing it into here. So I think that will be something like CHPO. In this case, it isn't, so we're just going to have to look through until we can find the postcode. CH, incidentally, is your the fields that you need to be using for your delivery addresses. So it's actually looking at the transaction header information in Exchequer rather than the line information. So you can see that most of it is just referring to header. So like our reference, for example, would be the transaction reference, which would be sales invoice number 100, for example. Here we go. So you've got the delivery postcode here. So I'm just going to add that in. And that shows in there as well. So moving down a little bit, this information, if you remember from the preview, was more of a header information. So when we were selecting the design fields, I mentioned that TH hour reference was the sales invoice number. When you look at a transaction on screen, you have your reference and alt reference fields. So the your reference field here has been pulled through, the account number and the salesperson that's held in the alt reference field has been pulled through as well, and actually a formula for the page number as well. So if it was a multiple page invoice, that would be shown, and you've got transaction dates. You can add transaction due dates onto here, anything you like really. Everything that you see on this header of the information is available to pull through in the form designer. Similarly for your lines as well, so if you're using any user-defined fields and things like that, you can pull those through onto the form designer as well. It's all held within this dictionary in here. And what's been done on here is, again, we've got a text box that's been filled with black colour, and then white text on the top, just that it looks a little bit fancy when the form design's printed out. And there's been some lines you can see here that have been inserted by using this option here, just to kind of break all of that off as well. Now, this section here is the table. So a table allows you to select several fields and display them in a list. So for example, your transaction lines, your statement lines, that kind of thing. You can only have one table per form design, but you'll find that most of your form designs will have a table. And the reason that I say to copy an existing design if you're going to create a new one is purely because that table's already built for you, and there's no messing around having to insert and build it from scratch. If you double click on the table, you can see all of the information here. So we've got description, unit price, discount and total. And you can set field widths on here, so you may want to mess around changing the field widths just so you can fit all of the information in there, and you can give it different titles as well, so you can call the column title really whatever you want. So if you wanted to add a new field into here, so for example, I might want to show the stock code on my sales invoice. If you select add, you can add either database fields, which is just going to take you back into this screen where you can access the library of database fields, or you can add a formula. So your formula normally is used for calculation fields, that kind of thing. So if we just add a column in here, and I might want to add the transaction line stock code. So I would look on the lines tab, and I'm guessing it's going to be something like TLS, ST, TLSTKCOD, so TL stock code. And let's just give it a column title. So at the moment, if I just add that in there, that might not be in the place that I want it, so I can use the move up and move down. So actually I want it to show on the far left of this grid. If I select OK, you can see it's sort of squished everything up. So that's where we need to start messing around with these field widths. So I'll probably make that a little bit smaller, and then make some of the other fields a bit smaller too, just to fit that in there. And you may want to sort of save these designs as you move along and print them in between any changes, just so you can make sure that you can get your alignment straight with your printer. So that's how you add information into that table. And again, down at the bottom here, we've got some text boxes here, just some headings, and we've got a breakdown of all of the different VAT rates and VAT amounts, which you may or may not choose to have in there. And some total fields here, again with some text boxes around them and things like that. The most common queries we really get on support with regards to form templates, with regards to changing them, is really, you know, if you've got lots of text boxes on there and you just need to go in and change information that sits within a text box, and it's just a case of double clicking on it and adding in your text, or taking out your text, editing it, whatever you need to do. So if we go to File and Save to save that design, and I'm just going to go to File and Print Preview, and you'll see we've now got our postcode showing in there, and we've now got a column for the stock code as well. You'll see across here there's some lines missing, things like that. So that's the kind of thing that you can do within the Form Designer and really give it the look and feel that you need it to have. So I'm actually going to go and print one of my sales invoice designs to this form design now, just so we can see a little bit more information coming through on that. So if we print this sales invoice here, when you first go to print a document, the form design will be displayed here. So we can see at the moment that's looking at new inv. So for the purpose of this exercise, I'll just browse and pick up the new form design that we've created, which is this one here. And that's not going to save that in there as a default, that's just changing it for just this once. So I'm just going to print that to screen. Okay, and we can now see our stock code pulling through on there. But what I can see is that my total column could do with being made a little bit bigger, and maybe I can change my description line and make that column a little bit smaller. And that's where we would go back into the form design and into the table and start changing these field widths. Okay, so you may be thinking, when I went to print that sales invoice, where is it pulling this default from? So the form designer has something known as form definition sets, which I mentioned earlier on in the video, where you can assign different forms to different customers. So in the form designer, if we go to options and system setup form definition sets, as standard, you would just have a global defaults, but you may have several other form definition sets. So the global default is the form definition set that every customer or supplier would use, unless you had a default form definition set against the customer or supplier record. So if I open a customer record, and go onto the defaults tab, you'll see there's a box here for form set. So you may want a handful of customers to look at a different sales invoice design to everybody else. And the best example I can think of is if you send out some invoices in different currencies, and you want some invoices to display the euro symbol and some to display the sterling symbol, for example. So if I just open up global defaults and go into sales and sales invoice, it's defaulting to this form template called new inv, and that's where it was pulling that default from. If I want to change that, just double click and simply just go to the design that we've created. And if I save that, the next time I try and print this sales invoice again, you'll see that it's now defaulting to the new form design. So that was a very quick overview on the Exchequer Form Designer. Obviously you do have this help button here, so anywhere you click within the system, it's going to tell you a little bit more about what that's actually doing and bring up the interactive help, which is very useful. Anything that's underlined here you can click on and it will take you to more information, and it's quite interactive in that anything you click on a screen print will tell you more about what that is actually doing. Thank you for listening to this introduction video. If you've got any questions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to contact the HBP support team.